Olli's summer cottage, writing the book every goddamn weekend for 3 years, and here we are now with one of our first chapters. We basically go into the nature, we go into the icy lake, we go to the sauna, we cook real food, we gather, we forage, we make those things, and we don't check email, we don't do any of that stuff, we just work on it all the time. And the nutrition chapter is a pinnacle of our work, and Olli is a medical doctor, Jaakko is a nutrition specialist, I'm a technology specialist on this project, so these guys know even more about those things than I could ever imagine.
Yeah, it's grateful. I'm very grateful to be here. Over half left this building. Maybe they were getting some food and drinks, but amazing place. You're all amazing. Yesterday was simply astonishing. The upgrade dinner. If you missed that, next time I would highly recommend it. It was so much fun. So like MasterChef action. I've been really enjoying myself, and this is actually what we're going to present today. Is the scientific side of what we are doing in Upgrade Dinner. So how you can upgrade your nutrition and the food you eat.
Yeah, yesterday was pretty epic, I have to say. Even from my opinion, the kind of uplifting energy that was going on, even after the whole event was like crazy. So I'm also very grateful to be here, and feel free to ask us anything when you see us aside. So let's get into the content.
Yeah. So there are 5 chapters in our book, and each week is available on our website for free. You can download it at biohackingbook.com. Ben Greenfield's 3 words are in that book as well about the work that we do. And nutrition is available on the last week of May. So within a few weeks, you're going to get the book. It's 170 plus pages, over 500 meta studies in the last few years. A lot of new stuff put into very visual form. We have over 100 visualizations in that book. But let's get into the nutrition. We're going to talk only about the tip of the iceberg of what's in there. So Hippocrates, is that how you pronounce his name? No, not really. Hippocrates.
It depends on the language.
Which language?
In Finnish it's Hippocrates.
Hippocrates. Okay, let's use Finnish. Hippocrates. Okay. So he said that let thy food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And I mean, what we take in is what we are, in a way. And if you look in nature, you look at other mammals and other creatures, the bear, which is the pinnacle of our, or the totem of the nutrition chapter.
King of the forest.
Yeah, he's the king of the forest and also the national animal of Finland. And what do you think about bears, especially the brown ones?
That's a good question. What do you think about that? I actually was very excited. I got into bears when we started to, write this chapter, and the whole mythological aspect of bears in Finland is super fascinating. But I think the side is very interesting because, for example, bear's meat. Have you ever eaten bear meat? Anyone? It's best when the blueberry season or bilberry season is on, and they eat so much those bilberries that those anthocyanins really get into the meat and the color changes. So that's a good example for me, like we could be doing the right things, but in the wrong amounts. Like what bears have taught me, that when the berry season is on, you really have to immerse yourself with them, and then you can know, like, okay, this is the effect that bilberries actually have when you're eating half a kilo of them and stuff like that. So and I'm not joking.
So it's not only about what you eat, but what the things that you eat. And we're not just talking about animals here, but also plants, what they're taking in as nutrients, and insects and all these things in nature. Bears are actually omnivores, so their digestive systems, just like ours, is designed to digest both meat and protein as well as plants. And if you look at nature, who else is foraging? Bears and as humans. Blue whales are the largest mammals, and they feed mainly on krill. And they developed this largest nervous system on this planet out of krill. Does anyone know what krill eat?
It's not about krilling, that's for sure.
It's phytoplankton. And phytoplankton has a complete ideal balanced state, all the different nutrients that life really needs.
This is basically Jacques Cousteau's stuff. He said that the future of nutrition is in the oceans. And I find it just fascinating that many people are just like, there's nothing new under the sun, you're just eating the same stuff that always. But I think that not actually, because humans have never been eating phytoplankton. But in the past few decades, for example, I remember the studies around Nalochloropsis gaditana, which is one of the species of these that humans can eat. And it's basically the most complete nutritional profile that I've ever seen. Like, there are things that are leverages for us as a food, as a technology. So that's a good sign of that.
So you want to go back to the roots, like literally.
Yeah.
Eating root, this is like root of the ocean.
Yeah.
So it's got condensed every minerals, every vitamins.
So we will be basically having some kind of bioreactors on our homes for growing phytoplankton, to put that into a morning coffee or something like that.
It's very interesting also in terms of you look at things like omega-3 oils and omega-3 to 6 in this, and omega-3 is actually EPA DHA, which is normally from animal sources. In nature, plants usually produce ALA form, which doesn't absorb that readily by us humans, unless you hack it a little bit. For example, you can do that with turmeric. That's why vegetarian diets in India, they don't have a huge problem with omega-3, because actually the turmeric that they mix their food with to make curry actually increase the absorption and conversion of the ALA form into EPA DHA. Okay, so also rich in B vitamins. That's the trick for building this huge, enormous nervous system. Next. So you are what you eat and what they eat, and if you look at just like you go back in time to the very first life forms, bacteria, and you go up to plants and fungi and green algae and all these things that we are talking about here, into us over there, mammals. And so we literally come from, these things that are extremely tiny and single-celled organisms, and they are perfect food also for us. And also, if you think of the soil that the plants grow in and the symbiotic relationship that the plants develop with fungi and bacteria in their root systems, and how all those things play into developing these beautiful nutrients that we can get in. Right now, we don't forage that much. Our ancestors did. Depending on habitat, around 100 different plants were used locally. And people who lived in different parts, like those who lived in the shores and those who lived in the mountains, they would trade these things together. So if you are from the seaside, you would bring some other things to the hill and back.
Yeah, so who's been foraging? Like, do you have a yard? You could find like 10 edible plants or more from your yard.
Better
like
stuff
nettle roots.
And I think it's just good to understand the more we go to the roots, whether it was algae, you always get more nutrition in the start of the whole cycle. And whether it was wild plants that always contain more of everything basically. And last night I was so kind of excited about the flavor profiles, because of course all the wild plants contain so rich variety of essential oils and things that are not just present in kind of like I said, there are dumber plants, like a lettuce that's grown in a cubicle with one light. The plant has no reason to produce more complex chemistry. And whenever you have more things going on, the plants produce a lot of different compounds that are interesting and beneficial for us and communicate to much deeper systems inside of us. And I think that that's one of the things that most of the people don't have any connection with these things and don't feel what these things actually do.
Yeah, think about corn. It's like the most produced crop in the whole world, like 40% of every crops in the world. Wheat and rice, they're pretty close. So if you think you only eat that, what you're gonna get from the plant-wise, like the wisdom of the plants?
But I also think that, for example, I visited several times in Peru, and I've always just like fascinated why they would grow corn. And the deeper I digged, it's a grass plant that is capable of getting a lot of minerals from the soil if the soil is treated properly. So it can contain like 50 minerals. So that's quite a different thing that the yellow corn that we are having, and they had this like dark, rich, black variety of corn that was grown on a really mineral-rich soil. So of course the whole trend has been that we've cultivated all the subtle and more complex chemistry out of the plants and basically left with just more carbs, less bitter compounds, all of this, and that's hugely problematic.
Yeah, and also it's affecting your taste buds and the receptors. If you eat only like 10 foods, you're used to eating junk, you're gonna get like blocked. If you would eat like a wild herb, it would taste probably horrible. I've actually tested with my friends. I foraged some plants and tried this, and I'm like, ugh! I personally think they taste very good and very rich, and the variety is
not used to the bitter tastes. And it's not just the soil that it grows in that basically brings up all these things into the plant, but it's also how the plant protects itself from its environment. And I actually have some wild rucola I was growing in my garden, and it was attacked by snails. And I tasted some of those leaves that were bitten by these critters, and those were much stronger tasting than other parts of the plant. And it's the same for roots. If the soil is dead because you threw some Roundup into it and there is nothing really living in it, the roots either are not going to be attacked by what are bacteria, fungi, and so on, and the plant is not going to produce those complex alkaloids to protect itself. So if you look at plants like ginger or turmeric or what else? Ginseng roots, the wild ones that grow in nature that actually have to protect themselves are much higher in the kind of medicinal properties that we want to get into our bodies.
Yeah, I think now for the past 5 years I've been really into soil science, how to like make all the good bacteria and the biological home for the plants a good one, and dumping like tens of kilos of spirulina, ashes, mycorrhizal fungi, all of that. And I think that this summer I will be actually getting a decent quality food. Like,
so you're investing more on growing on food, I guess.
Yeah. But the point, like organic food or whatever, the varieties are genetically quite weak, and then we are basically feeding them junk food, just a few minerals to get them big. But the plant doesn't have the nutrition to produce the immunological system in the same way that we need zinc, we need polysaccharides, whatever, to really form a complete defense system. So I think that's a good metaphor to just think about like how much we're actually putting effort in taking the upgraded level for, cultivating plants in a proper way, and what's happening now.
So what's happening in the UK?
Yeah, we want to look into what's going on in UK, and we found
who's from
pretty
UK
scary
here
stuff.
Originally? Oh, that's pretty much. Well, surprised we're in London.
There is this great project called the Open Data Initiative, Britain's Diet in Data. Check it out. The website has these things in an interactive form. And if you look at things like vegetables, you have less fresh vegetables, more of these kind of frozen or processed vegetables. And we also have less of these kind of canned vegetables, fermented foods and so on, preserving the nutrients with a cocktail of different kind of acids and even sugar could be used to preserve food for longer periods of time. We don't have that anymore because we have refrigeration and we can just dump things into the freezer. And I mean, fresh things, we don't really have that anymore. Now, if you look into the dairy and other things, I mean, less eggs, less butter, but more processed sugar, high kind of milk products. We don't even have aged cheese anymore that much. I mean, cheddar and all these things. It's more about the kind of mozzarella, you know, all these kind of soft natural cheese. The aged cheese actually is good in that way that it breaks down the lactose in it and many other sort of problematic compounds.
Yeah.
So sometimes these kind of food preservating methods that we have used in the past are very good for us, also for our digestive system.
What do you think is the reason for this? I think this is a straight reflection of our society, culture. We have to do everything fast. We have to have time to prepare meals, to enjoy food, to share it with friends. All we only do is work, and how to be more productive and eat very poorly.
Just to learn that what things are actually good to do with the slower pace. And of course, fermenting is the only preparation method that actually enhances the nutritional value. So I think it's super important to just realize that how little we do those things that were the core for everything.
And with eggs and butter, I mean, we have had this huge campaign against these things, that as if they are not good for you. And suddenly, the question is then, okay, if we are told that you shouldn't eat egg yellows because whatever cholesterol, you shouldn't eat butter, saturated fat, and so on. Whatever the story is behind that, we of course today we have new information that maybe the experiment we did on population, it has not been as wise and as well thought as
it didn't work out.
Yeah, it didn't really work out. So we are going back to butter and eggs now. But what was replaced? I mean, once we take these things out, what are we putting in place? And it's pretty. It's not beautiful.
Margarine,
to look at.
hydrogenated vegetable oils, all these not so good fats. What's interesting, we were thinking of, where's the sandwich slide? What's the next one?
It's coming up.
Yeah, well, I'll get back to that. But who eats like a whole animal with joints? Nose to tail eating? Have you heard of nose to tail?
If you eat only the muscles, I mean, you get a lot of methionine, but you don't get a lot of glycine, and that creates an imbalance in those, and it actually increases inflammation. So the fact that we now favor kind of lean cuts is not good for us. We should go back into eating the whole animal, the joints, everything, because glycine actually reduces inflammation. It's very essential. And
it's also more tasty, if you think about it, like pots and bone broths. That's just superfood. Actually, it's the superfood for me.
Yeah, I dislocated my shoulder 3 weeks ago, and completely out of the socket, and I pushed it back in place, and I started all this kind of biohacking stuff with applying cold and running electricity through the area to increase blood flow. And I also did all the nutritional interventions I can do. But one thing that I immediately said to Valerie, my girlfriend, is that we have to put the reindeer bones. I was like literally screaming on the floor, put the reindeer bones into the
kettle,
simmering into the kettle. And I was drinking this bone broth like tea, like all the time. I was just drinking it, and no problem. I mean, I can do these things now just fine, no problem. My shoulder is just fine. Usually it takes like 3 months to fix your elbow.
Just keep on going.
Yeah,
I can do 100, no problem. So it's amazing what food can do to you if you eat proper things that suddenly you need for synthesizing, this tissue that has been damaged. Now another
There's the sandwich.
Here's the sandwich.
It has to do with the toasters.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea which year was it toasting became like popular?
Ooh.
That's for me. It's like what?
We have been told less salt. Salt is not good for you. I mean, your cardiovascular disease reasons, whatever. But what do we put in place? I mean, sugars, a lot of carbs in different forms. Pizzas, frozen, not frozen, whatever.
Yeah, you need salt, good
Chinese
salt with
takeaway.
minerals. It's for example, children in the school, they eat low sodium, low salt food, and it's not satisfying. And they get irritated because they don't get the salt they need for the nervous system and the electrical impulses in the body. Instead, a lot of sugar, a lot of carbs. They get restless.
The way how I have fortified my salt with iodine is actually to use seaweeds. So I just grind in some seaweeds. So I'm always, when I'm using salt, I get a little bit of seaweed at the same time.
And I think it's just important to understand that the newest big meta-analysis on the use of salt also told a story that the group of people who have the lowest amount of salt use had actually the highest risk for cardiovascular disease and all that. We didn't, hear that too much, but of course it's super important that whenever we look at the nature, what all the animals are after is, sodium. It's not, everywhere. We have potassium everywhere, raw plants eating that, but where do we get actually sodium? And I think that's just for people who are starting to eat more unprocessed food, it's really intuitive that you actually need quite a bit of salt.
And think about salt. If you highly refined salt, it tastes chemical, at least for me. For example, in the airplane, I asked for salt. Big mistake. It's just a purified sodium chloride. But for example, good mineral salt, Celtic sea salt, for example, it's rich.
Exactly. So, what is the famous beverage of Great Britain?
Perhaps a cup of tea.
Cup of tea, maybe. I mean, this is embarrassing, guys. Less tea. What is being put in place? Soft drinks, cider, perry, champagne, a lot of alcohol. I mean, less tea, more alcohol. Less tea, more coffee. I don't know if it's good coffee. I hope it should be like readily grinded and great sourced. It could be a good substitute, but I think it's more like processed coffee drinks. So here we are. So right now we are in a state where we are then prescribed pills to get ourselves back to health. And these are diet, I mean taking all kinds of medication and so on. And the doctors are telling us, it's not really, it doesn't really matter what you eat. Just have
but
low salt, low fat.
Food doesn't matter for your intestines, but take these pills, it's good.
No wonder we are so fat and sick. And it's not like having a little bit more supplements, like a multivitamin, that's going to fix this thing. Because it's the whole ecology that's supposed to be in there, and the whole ecosystem in which you are supposed to be living from an evolutionary perspective is not there. It's replaced by this chemical factory that we call food today. So let's start from the very beginning, from the digestive system. Olli is a doctor. He's going to give us a little guide through of this. Here's
here's like the basic. In our book, we want to present the system so that you understand what's happening actually in the body when you eat food. I think that's critical. It's the same thing in every different parts of our book, in sleep or exercise or mind. It's critical to know the system, but you don't have to know it like very detailed, but just the basics. For example, what's the stomach is the first go from your where you get the bolus of the food, and it's pre-digested there with the hydrochloric acid. Then it goes through the small intestine. Most of the nutrients are absorbed in there. Then the poop is gonna be formed slowly, and excess water is gonna be retracted from there, and you got gastrointestinal enzymes, which are broken down the different parts. So when this is working in cooperation, you don't have any problems. How many have had gastrointestinal problems in life?
I used to have.
Yeah, I think it's probably even more than this, because many people think it's normal to have bloating and gas and these kind of things all the time, because they're so used to it. But you can actually have life without any symptoms.
And the nutrient absorption is done by this system. I mean, and also we live in a symbiotic relationship with bacteria that are producing a lot of essential nutrients, vitamins that we need. And if you just kill those things off with antibiotics or you're feeding the wrong guys with the wrong type of food, it's not going to work optimally. It's not just going to function.
If you have any questions, you can raise your hand and we arrange the microphone. So I will be glad to answer questions. I like that. And,
Yeah.
So don't hesitate.
But let's squat.
Yeah. All right.
Do you even
Actually,
squat?
everybody could stand up and do a few deep squats. It's okay because you're pretty. That's boring.
That's actually the natural position of natural resting position of humans. Then we invented the chair, and then we invented the toilet. What do you call it? Whatever it is. Anyway, what? Urinal. Yeah, urinal. Urinal. Urinal for your urinal. Yeah, that's it. So it's a natural position for these things to move out, and it's an. I mean, sitting is killing us.
You got actually squatty potty. You heard of squatty potty? And in Finnish, it's kakkajakkara. That's actually a wooden made squatty potty. Kakkajakkara.
But you can basically just, I mean, this is what I do at the airports. I would go inside into this thing, and I would just, stand on top of the urinal, and I just squat.
Push it real good.
It pushes it real good, real fast through, and doesn't leave any trace. It's really good for you.
And this is the point where we break the ice.
Yeah. We usually can't, get very far without some humor in this work that we do. All disease begins in the gut. This is the Hippocrates again.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
There was this squatty potty. I don't know how. You're so fast.
Yeah.
Biohacked.
Yeah. Lightning fast.
So we went through the digestive system. Now if we go into the very details of the digestive system.
Yeah, well, as you can see, this is highly structured and how would you put it, like fractal-like system. So actually in the small intestine, the area of the absorption field is about half of a squash field. Is it squash? No. Badminton field? Yeah. So it's pretty big. So there are smaller and smaller and smaller structures. So if you think that the health of your gut lining isn't good, would it affect your absorption of the nutrients?
It's like one cell wall, kind of.
Yeah, only one cell is separating from the blood flow. Leaky gut is a syndrome. It's actually scientifically verified, where you get these normal tight junctions between epithelial cells leaky. So you might get like toxins and anti-nutrients actually circulating in the blood, and then you get immune complexes, and you might get inflammation and autoimmunity if your genetic predisposition is.
When we are
unlucky.
young, we can eat almost everything. Nothing feels like it's hurting us.
Yeah.
But when we get older, we get some inflammation. This lining gets damaged. All kinds of things that in the past didn't go to the bloodstream, they will go into the bloodstream. The immune system will mark those things as intruders and then cause more inflammation around your body. So then you get allergies. You get, you can get some skin problems.
Which
all kinds of things, even rheumatism can be the result of this.
Circulus vitiosus, that's it in Latin, the vicious circle. So it's feeding itself. So I think Hippocrates was pretty smart if you say that all disease begins in the gut. When you have a good gut lining, you're pretty much guaranteed that you are going to stay very healthy.
That's the system that you want to hack. And that's been, people are asking what I'm focusing on, because I've been, talking about for almost a decade that I'm never sick and but like the focus is and will always be on the whole digestive system. So whether you were healthy or not, that's the place to start always, and just keep on working with that.
And if you get like a inflamed gut lining, very soon you have an inflamed blood-brain barrier, and you get all kinds of crap entering your brain as well. And you get brain fog and all these things that are not good for you. So the link between sort of the extended brain that we have right here, that has a lot of neurons and is communicating on its own, it's communicating to the brain. If you eat something bad, it's going to shut down your brain also. That's not a state of high performance.
Yeah, we actually have two brains. One is here, one is here.
And the guys running this one here, the microbiome, is extremely essential. Actually, we have more alien DNA in our bodies dictating what's going on.
It's the Angry Birds.
That we have cells in our bodies. Like that's pretty crazy. So we have things in our digestive systems, and we have other things living on our skin. And we're going to be talking about this a little bit later. There's a panel also on this. So we are bacteria. We are living in a symbiotic relationship with these things. Who you are is not just what you thought you are. You are a complex system, and you live in a symbiotic relationship with the bacteria and the gut flora that you adopted from your mother on birth. And people who are born through what is like kind of like a cesarean route,
C-section.
Yeah, they might have Crohn's disease, all kinds of problems, because they don't have this seed of alien intelligence living inside of them. So you have to sort of transplant that somehow back to that person. And if you dive deeper into the bacteria and what kind of guys are living there, I mean, you are feeding them. You are just feeding them, and they're producing all the nutrients or breaking down things so that they can be readily absorbed. And they feed on all kinds of things, and you feed them. And if you eat a lot of things that have, for example, antibiotic traces in them, those are going to be in your gut also, affecting that flora there. If you use a lot of soap on your skin and everywhere, I mean, the same story here. Maybe something else starts to grow there than the good guys.
I was just thinking, I think it was some professor here in the UK in King's College or somewhere who did an experiment for his son, just feeded him with a McDonald's kind of a diet for 15 days or something like that. And it decreased the variety of different beneficial bacteria in his gut by like 40%. So I just think it's super important to always think about, like, who are you feeding by the food that you are eating? That actually rhyme. Kind of
so Jaakko said that he's feeding his plants spirulina, these seaweeds. But you're feeding them also into yourself. I mean, I've witnessed this guy at one of our summer cottage retreats, like going completely through a full bag of spirulina tablets or whatever. Actually, he eats it like straight from the bag, like within a weekend. An amount that usually takes me a year to just consume. So what is the result of this?
Well, I just think that it's interesting for me to do these certain experiments and then quantify, like, for example, these single-celled organisms, these microalgae that are actually, in the case of spirulina, they're kind of cyanobacteria. And I've increased like tens of times the amount of those bacteria in my gut, and what they do, they produce certain vitamins, B vitamins, vitamin K, all those things. So they're not just some things that are there, they are allies that are helping us to produce nutrients. So I just find it fascinating that we can play around with these things, and how I think about almost every good things, whether it was berries, whether it was the polyphenols in chocolate or whatever. These are prebiotics. This is the food that I'm feeding to these good guys that have, you know, invaded my whole.
So instead of taking a B vitamin, you might want to, you know, feed some things to your gut bacteria so that they become more efficient in producing B vitamins for you, so you can feel more energetic. So that's the gut-brain axis, and I mean, if your gut is inflamed, your brain is inflamed, that's no brain, no gain.
Let me ask a question. If you feel bad in your stomach, like it's bloated, do you feel good in your head? Clear? No? I struggled with like many years this problem, and I had setbacks like infection from Spain. I was like terrible diarrhea and vomiting, and I lost like 44 kilos, and it took me like 3 years to build it back. And I did research and analyzed my microbiome. Okay, I need this, okay, I need that, and for certain times I needed to avoid certain foods so that my gut could get better. Now I eat what I want and without any problems. If I eat gluten, I don't get any symptoms, but I prefer not to eat that.
Came a message that I have spirulina in my teeth. So.
In our book, we go to the upgraded cooking methods, the upgraded ways of looking at nutrients and different food groups, and what kind of decisions and choices can you make at each group to optimize some of these things that we've been talking about. But let's go through a few things. The 3 pillars of nutrition that we define in the book. Let's start from individuality, nutrient density, and quality. And if you take individuality, for example, this is not something that the general dietary recommendations are after. I mean, they are based on population studies, and then what comes out is some kind of synthesis that works maybe for an average number of population that is usually just enough in terms of reducing some common disease in wider population by this is what they are. They're not about optimal nutrition at all. It's just like barely keeping you alive and not falling sick.
Avoiding like basic sicknesses like.
Then we go to blood tests, and we have like averages, population averages once again. And what is an average, which is sort of within the boundaries where it should be, the doctor tells you, is not necessarily optimal in your case.
Who thinks you're an average person? What's an average person? Nobody is average. Everybody's an individual.
Yeah, and our genetics plays a lot into this equation of what makes us different and how we respond to different things in different ways. And here's some results that I have from my just like genetic testing. DNA Fit is one of our exhibitors here, and there's also a talk by Andrew Steele later on this one. But I went through in our, if you want to listen, me and Andrew Steele going through some of my results, you can go to Biohackers podcast and download the latest episode. But for example, in my case, I have, from genetic reasons, higher requirements for vitamin D intake, and if I take the recommendations, I'm going to be deficient of it. But if I take it 10 times more, my blood serum levels of vitamin D are where they should be for average people. So there are all these things that play into your genetic code. But then again, they don't necessarily cause things unless you really develop those factors. And from our genes, about 30% is active, running certain programs. And if you change something in your environment, in the epigenetics, it can turn on some genes that they start to code proteins in specific ways.
For example, you have a good example of a celiac predisposition. Yeah. So if you would eat a lot of wheat, a lot of grains, and you would have a lot of stress and bad gut, which actually you had, but you fixed it yourself, you could develop celiac disease.
Yeah. So I never really got an immediate response from eating like wheat, but definitely like kind of like brain fog kind of things and bloating and these things. But we often don't take those signals we want to have a diagnosis. You need to be a celiac disease patient that you finally understand that you shouldn't be eating wheat. So you need a diagnosis today. We are not listening to our bodies, but our bodies are telling us. The information is there. It's telling you this is not good for you. Now, then we have blood biomarkers, and we have presentations going deeper into these things and how you can hack those things. But I think it's very powerful if you combine DNA testing and you use nutrigenomics. So you use genetic information, you tailor a diet. DNA Fit has great tools for that. And then you test from your blood biomarkers if you are getting the results you're looking for, and then you can optimize those things. So we are all individuals.
A guidance to interpret the results. Tamsin Lewis is presenting about different nutrient analysis.
At 4, if I remember correctly. Yeah. In the mezzanine. Then we look at the quality ingredients. If you want to upgrade the nutrition, start from your kitchen. I mean, if this thing is a complete mess, it doesn't matter what kind of ingredients you really buy in there. You're going to get a mess out of it. So you want to have the best kind of cooking methods and tools. What would be like the top 3 for you guys?
In terms of ingredients?
I mean, if you just buy a house and you get a kitchen, what would you immediately upgrade there?
Blender.
Well, yeah, blender is essential, but I wouldn't use myself induction cooker. I don't actually have it. I like fire, gas. It's the flavor. I like it better. And the best would be with real wood and real fire. Other would be a nice, good functioning refrigerator, so you can store and without any additional microbiomes. Water filter would
I
be
think jars are also important, at least for me. I immediately, when I buy some things like spices, I just replace the container. It's like a plastic one. I just put it into a dark container that doesn't let light in, and which keeps it. Myron glass, yeah, I use Myron.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's the best type of glass you can get. And once you buy supplements, whatever, it just becomes a whole mess. So I want to put them into these jars, and
this is Myron glass,
readily available that we can use. This is a special type of glass. Lets in only the specific wavelengths of light. It's actually good for the ingredients.
I like the idea of keeping kind of open space for the things that I might get kind of excited about. So I always put my kitchen in a way that the things that I'm right now into are on a site that you will actually use them, because often we just forget. The stove for me is a huge one. I pretty much think that those herbal tea bags, it's a bad herbalism. It's terrible. People need to get going by big kettle and start using bulk herbs to get that going. And that's one of the base things, just to answer.
How do you make
question.
like a Lipton tea bag? You have this plant that produces tea. You take the very tops of that. That's going to be the premium stuff that you sell to the premium tea shops. And then you have the leaves, and you have the kind of like the whole parts of the plant. Those are a little bit more expensive. Then you have the broken ones, and then you have, there's the dust on the floor. This is the stuff that they're putting into Lipton tea bags. Like this is the kind of tea.
And some sugar. Actually, it's pretty astonishing that there actually have been found sugar.
They break down the cell walls of the tea leaves and oxidize the contents. I mean, it's not good. It's not good for you.
You get actually a good glance of different teas and different methods in the nutrition book. So there's a special section on teas too.
Yeah, if you want to hack on that one.
Yeah.
Then you fill your kitchen with real foods, not necessarily with supplements and all these things. Supplements come after you put these basics into place, and then you just use those things to optimize some things that are still missing or not functioning optimally. So real food that comes from the ground, preferably organic, and local is essential here.
And can you put it back to the slide?
Sure.
Real food, it's beautiful, don't you think? Different vibrant colors. Add more colors to your food. I like this picture. I could stare at it for maybe as long as Vesa's brilliant art here, because it's nature's art.
Then we have upgraded cooking methods. What do you, Jaakko, have to say about like that, like frying things and?
Mostly
Going
grilling.
to answer that I still hate the Lipton-Stevek. No, I think that the biggest things that people are missing is the use of spices. Those are the kind of most nearby superfoods, super herbs that almost nobody uses. And they reduce these effects when used properly. So just start to use more turmeric, more peppers, more stuff that enhances the absorption of nutrition and also reduces the amount of these unwanted chemicals that are happening when we roast and toast and do all kinds of things in our kitchen. And yeah, just go slow. I think that's the whole thing.
Or temperature cooking is good, like crock pot method or slow roasting in oven, or sous vide, which is underwater in French. Basically, you vacuum pack things. You can use if you are if you want to avoid like plasticides and things like that. Use special containers designed for this kind of form of cooking, where you have a thermostat in water and you have a very specifically set temperature. And once the inner temperature of the food reaches that, it's perfect. And it's not overcooked. Like if you put on a pan something, it's like 200 degrees Celsius, the surface, and it really burns things in there. You get all kinds of denaturated fats, and you create these advanced glycation end products, age, which also makes you age, PAH. If you fry vegetables, the kind of yellowing that you get on like potatoes and so on, that's acrylamide. Acrylamide, you don't want to have that stuff on your body, but this is the kind of like crystallized thing that forms in there. So you want to avoid like very high temperature. You want to go slow in temperature. Think about it. If you buy something like organic, high quality ingredient, then you just grill the shit out of it. It's not going to be really good stuff in the end. I mean, you have a great source, but then you destroy it with your cooking method. So I rather, if I have really good like piece of nature-fed reindeer, I just put it in a sous vide machine and let it go through it for several hours, and I have it in its most pristine form. So you want to avoid toxins, of course, not just in terms of the food ingredients and the cooking utensils, and those are also important, like avoiding things like Teflon covering, maybe replacing those things with, what would you use? I mean, what's in your kitchen?
Well, always glass, and if you go as far as these guys, it's of course Myron glass, and there's just layers and layers and everything. Just if you're using something often, just go with the best quality. I think that's like no-brainer. If you're doing something every now and then it's not that important. But if you're using, let's say, a kettle every day, I would go with the like surgical level titanium, kettle to get the best quality, and that's the way to go.
When we buy meat, I mean, we feed them antibiotics, and over time, I mean, the system produces stronger and stronger bacteria against those antibiotics. So they become antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and you are getting those into yourself as well. So if you feed on food that's like basically killed with all kinds of things, I think this is also the case probably in the future for plants as well. When we have soil that is completely destroyed with Roundup, then we get kind of like Roundup kind of resistant bacteria and fungi and all these things. Those are going to end up in your digestive system. So I would rather just have nature taking care of these things. You want to minimize anti-nutrients, and
do you have any idea what's an anti-nutrient? Well, it's the opposite of nutrient. Well, anyhow, it's a compound that's found in many foods that's actually protecting the plant from like insects or other things. But if we eat those a lot, it can affect, for example, our gastrointestinal system and cause problems, especially if there are already problems. So do you have any idea which are the plants that have the most anti-nutrients? Grains? Wheat in particular, yeah. Whole grain wheat in particular, because it has the whole grain and the germ brand endosperm. There are especially prolamins and lectins. They can affect, for example, your blood sugar regulation, affecting the gastrointestinal system, destroying the cells.
So when a plant produces a new seed for life, it needs to balance between nutrients for new life and also like anti-nutrients against bacteria, fungi, and whatever germs. And those are if you look in nature where you see like plants that are completely untouched by critters, those are where you have the highest kind of like most effective tools against them. And actually we have those in our spice cabins. Like if you look at like thyme and rosemary, and they're producing very effective volatile oils and compounds that are just like poison and toxic. And actually those are also poisonous and toxic to humans in high quantities, but in low amounts, those are actually stimulating our immune systems for a very positive reaction. So you want to use spices not just as a kind of garnish, but increase the amount of spices in your food, because then you're stimulating your immune system with these things that you're taking in. So sometimes like minimizing anti-nutrients is not really like going completely crazy about it, because you actually need to stimulate your system. Just like we are stimulating our systems with exercise, you want to stimulate your system with specific foods. But it makes a lot of sense to avoid certain things, because if you're bombarding your digestive system repeatedly and over again, having a sandwich in the morning, having a sandwich before lunch, having a sandwich in the afternoon, you're just completely all the time throwing in things that produce this kind of inflammatory state, and the system needs to fight these things, and over time you get chronic inflammation.
We have tools for that. Can you put next slide? So intelligent processing methods. For example, fermentation, creating good bacteria. Jaakko, you're like a pro in fermentation. Soaking, for example, you should soak nearly all nuts. Sprouting, it's very good. You can actually grow new food.
You can basically trick the seed, for example, think that now it's time to grow, so it's gonna just release phytates and other anti-nutrients, and that's why sprouting makes
For example, legumes, you really have to process them so that they're edible. This is an example of how you reduce phytate levels in soy. So not all soy is the same. Soy is in particular not in a good reputation for health, or there's like a controversy. But you could actually have like this very original forms of soy, like stored tempeh, natto,
miso,
fermented soy.
Miso.
Yeah. So then when you look into the actual food ingredients and foodstuffs, that's where you can also make different kind of choices depending on what kind of category we are looking at. You can look at through a leaf of lettuce against the light, and you can see the light through it. I mean, there is not much nutrients in them. And then you take something like rucola, you try the same thing, you can't see a goddamn thing through it. So you want to have the strongest, darkest colors in nature, the nature produces, and throw those into your system.
I think it's just so exciting to be alive this time, because in every category, when you think that, I've tried everything and there is so much higher quality coming in the pipeline all the time. And I'm just excited that nobody actually knows how good quality food we can grow. We for sure know what's the lowest quality food on the planet Earth ever been in terms of nutrition and all that, but like how far we can go. And every time I think like, this is the best extra virgin olive oil in the world, and then somebody comes with, I have this ice processed, like it just goes on, and it's so fascinating to be alive.
Take the whole.
Yeah.
The technology that's coming, we now know how optimized food's going to be, because remember, all foods release biophotons. The guy that did the original studies on this is Fritz Popp. Okay, he's a biophysicist. He's actually taken food, GMO food, non-GMO food. He's assessed the optical scanning. They are now beginning to sell in the United States optical scanners. So food companies are now beginning to scan all their foods. They're going to use this as a marketing device. People in Europe probably need to start to biohack their food by utilizing biophoton research. Because what do we know? Remember that all food webs are based on photosynthesis. Everything on this planet comes from the sun. So the amount of light that's in the food is the critical determining factor. So once you understand that can be quantified, your point that we don't know, we actually do. The problem is not too many people know that this research has already been done. And now the masses are going to be able to buy something for $150 US to do this. And the crazy thing is, back in our home country, the people that are buying this are actually like Walmart, the supermarkets. Why? Because they want to know from the organic farmers, when we spend $4 for an avocado that's organic, they want to know, is it really organic?
Yeah.
How much biophotons is here? And see, business is going to be using this, but people can use this information and be very, very powerful.
Absolutely, very good point right there. I mean, organic, anyone who has gone through getting an organic certificate, it's quite easy actually. It's quite complicated bureaucratic process, but in the end, once you are organic certified, and no one's going to check every batch coming out of your plant or if it's polluted by surrounding plantations.
It doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. Can you, for example, for the next slide, there is bilberry. Would you buy organic bilberry produce from Poland or go to the forest, like for example in Finland, and pick it up yourself?
Yeah. One thing about the scanners and all these things. So soon we all going to be able to go to a restaurant or to a supermarket and just assess the quality of the ingredient right there, and we are going to be ready to pay more in certain situations for higher frequency food coming from the sun.
Listen, everybody knows about the supply. If you're a vendor, you can tell the difference between wine from right here and right over here. And the interesting thing is, people don't realize that the microenvironment is well known. Unfortunately, too many people don't realize. We understand it for grapes, but we don't talk about it enough for people. And that's a huge factor.
Are we going to hear this more from you later today?
Oh, you're going to hear a lot.
Thank you. Okay, we have to finish our presentation. Thank you for your input.
Yeah. And my point was pretty much that by that point of view, I think that like phytoplankton would be one of the highest in biophotons and all that. But I don't know if anybody in the world knows how good quality phytoplankton we can grow. That was more of my point, like how far we can go when we also can now quantify it and catalyze the process by it. So
now, if you got our point, it's not just getting the best, highest quality foods and all these things, but if you can't absorb the nutrients from it, it's not going to be a big deal. If you're not growing the right kind of bacteria that really helps you to maximize and multiply the effect of that food, it's not going to be a good thing. It's not only about getting like some superfoods or whatever, like goji berries or some things like this. When you have the best stuff growing on your backyard, that's even better, higher frequency, that's more optimal to your genetics based on the habitat where you live. And today we can get all kinds of food from all around the world. We can have different cuisines in one afternoon. But we really have to go back to the kind of our roots, like what's growing on in our surroundings and what our ancestors have been eating. And one thing that's definitely missing there is fermented foods. We don't need this preservation method anymore because refrigeration, we think.
Anybody from Germany?
Sauerkraut.
Sauerkraut, yeah.
Yeah, sauerkraut is amazing.
But of course there is sauerkraut and then there is sauerkraut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the deal.
And my thinking is always like, what type of plants would you use for making sauerkraut? If you look for the nature, which is all the time competing with different types of strains of bacteria, wild plants have an immune system and symbiosis with bacteria that are the strongest strains. So if you took those strains and start to ferment those, you'll have quite a bit of more intelligence working with you, and especially because those are the bacteria that are producing the chemistry or intelligence towards those things that are present in your specific environment.
Yeah.
One tip, you could buy something like fermented cabbage, and then you just mix it up with wild herbs you collected, and you're just going to create a powerful cocktail out of it. So that's the probiotics. Then we need prebiotics for the gut bacteria to really like prosper and live happily.
You know what's
there.
this? No? Yes, Jerusalem artichoke. That's actually has 80 grams of inulin, which is a prebiotic per 100 grams.
If you don't know what it is, it means farting. It's very strong.
Especially
very
if you
good
got
food
IBS.
FODMAPs.
But it could be very useful for growing the good bacteria.
So farting is not always a bad thing. I mean,
It's natural. Babies fart. I have like a 4-month-old girl, and she farts a lot. Her system is developing and it's changing all the time, but that's natural. You have to remove the gas that's forming.
So, how low can we go? I mean, medicinal mushrooms, this is a big thing for us coming from Finland. I mean, we have very clean nature. We can forage mushrooms and wild herbs on private land, even we don't have to ask permission, which we have this every man's right, it's called. And there's beautiful stuff growing around. And there's things on the ground, obviously, produced. The fungi produces the mushroom itself. But the things that grow on trees are extremely powerful because they actually live for several years. They have to produce extremely complex biochemistry to fight all the nasties and bad guys and the bacteria and so on. If you look at just like a reishi, it's spotless usually. There's nothing. I was in the Amazon rainforest and I found a reishi there. I mean, it was the most beautiful reishi I've ever seen and completely spotless. Was just like sitting there waiting for me to make a tincture out of it. So you wanna really get the best, highest frequency foods that are growing on this planet. And actually like 60% of our DNA is akin to what's the mushroom's DNA. And so the kind of things that the mushrooms are able to produce as complex biochemistry, they go into our system just like keys go to a lock.
Why would you want to make a tincture?
To get the fat-soluble compounds in a bioactive form. I think the thinking is pretty interesting. If you think about the higher plants, so trees that produce the most kind of interesting chemistry to the surface of the tree. So for example, cinnamon, it's a bark and it's filled with this interesting chemistry. But what these tree mushrooms that are almost always non-toxic. There's just like a few exceptions in hundreds of different polypores, but they are mainly really safe. But what they are doing, they are kind of sucking into these complex chemicals and concentrating them into themselves. So I think it's just interesting to kind of be more aware that what's actually around us and why nature produces different forms and different things against different things. So we need to have fungi or mushrooms, we need to have bacteria as an allies, because if we're just focusing on plants or animal products, we're like really small, and I think these are the life forms that have been here much longer than plants or mammals, and we can get a lot of intelligence out of them.
Yeah, probably some alien intelligence. If you ask me.
It's already among us.
Yeah. I mean, we just wanna wrap up this thing now. I mean, our book is like full of details into these things. So if you find it interesting, eat real food. I mean, that's one of my favorite picks there. Increase nutrient density. One lettuce compared to another lettuce, or even to a handful of nettles, completely different story. So within food groups, like not just eating more plants, but what kind of plants and what kind of proportions and colors, everything that really factors in there. Cool.
Yeah.
So it's now available. Go to biohack.to/ph summit. You're gonna get this deal for a discount for some time.
This is not a diet book.
No, not at all. It's not a diet book.
It's totally different from any other nutrition book, because you can create your own diet.
Yeah, it's really a map to find the diet that works for you. It gives you some theories, some ways of looking at things, and concentrates a lot of research from the last few years. You can also get it from our stand, Biohacker Center stand, if you're interested. But anyway, so I'm Teemu,
Jaakko,
Olli.
Olli.
We are the Biohackers Handbook. Thank you.
Thank you.